I want to talk a little bit about generators and what you might be thinking you might need for a generator setup for power outages, blackouts, that type of thing. Not necessarily off grid. I'm going to get into a little bit more of that later on, but really just what the actual needs for if you find yourself without power during a storm or something happens. Uh, the results are that you probably don't need as big of a generator as you think. The first thing I would do is figure out how much power you actually need, what things you actually need to be running in a power outage situation to keep comfortable, to stay warm, to do the things you need to do. Typically, the main concerns are going to be refrigeration, so your freezer and your fridge. Uh, Communications, if you look at my last video about what happens in power outages and what to prepare for, you know that communication is important. Heat is going to be important. You may have some other needs, like if you have a sump pump that does need to be running because you're going to have a flood in your basement if you don't. That's something to consider as well. You probably don't need as much as you think, though. How you figure that out is I would go buy. I have one of these, and there's similar devices to this available on Amazon. They run about 20 bucks. And there's one called a kilowatt. I think that started it. There's lots of other clones. This is a clone one. I've had this for a long time, probably 15 years or so. It still works fine. I had to replace the batteries in it once. And all it happens is you plug this in and you plug your appliance in this side, and it tells you a few things. It tells you what the maximum wattage, what the maximum draw of that appliance was, how many, at any given time, how many watts it's consuming, and then over a period of time, how many kilowatt hours it consumed. You can program it to put in the price of your electricity, which will tell you how much it costs to run a certain appliance. I never worried about that. I just really want to know how much power I was drawing out of certain appliances. And it's kind of surprising because I've seen a lot of videos or a lot of advice on, or even advertisements on different generators or different power backup stations, things like that, that might be misleading. I've seen it commonly said that if you've got a fridge, you need 800 watts. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true. It depends on your fridge a lot. My fridge, I did some measurements. I'm just going to refer to my notes here. So my fridge, it's a fairly new fridge. It's just your regular household Samsung fridge. The maximum wattage that pulls is 236 watts. And over a 24-hour period, it was 1.08 kilowatt hours of electricity that it consumed. So the average 236 watts is only when it kicks on. There's two different types of things. There's what's called a reactive load and a resistive load. A reactive load is any appliance that has any kind of a motor. So it needs an initial surge of power. But that's only for 2 or 3 seconds that it needs that surge to get the motor going. A reactive load would be like an electric heater or lights. There is no initial kick. It's just if it's a 100-watt, say, light bulb, it's 100 watts, and that's it. But your reactive loads is where your problems are going to lie if it's a big reactive load. But on my fridge, like I said, it's 236 watts is the actual initial kick. And normally when it's running, if it's actually doing something, it might be at 100 watts, and sometimes that'll drop to 50 watts. It doesn't take that much power out. 1.08 kilowatt hours over 24 hours is not that much, to be honest with you. I measured my freezer. I have a stand-up freezer. So if you have a chest freezer, it might even be better than mine. The maximum wattage on my freezer is 599 was on the initial kick. However, over 24 hours, it only took 0.86 kilowatt hours. And because my meter only runs the time when it's got a load on it, it actually only ran for just about 9 hours out of 24 hours. The rest of the time, it didn't take any power at all. It wasn't doing anything. I measured a couple of other things. So my internet setup, we have a fixed wireless internet setup here. So that's an antenna on the roof, and then I have a router. Combined, 8 watts. And that's a resistive load. It's not a reactive. So it's 8 watts. No big, you can run that on almost anything. Doesn't really matter. Your typical lights are going to be 9 watts if it's an LED bulb. I did sometimes during a power outage, you might want to watch television or something like that. So I did measure I've got 2 televisions. The smaller one, the 32-inch that I have in the bedroom, also has an Amazon Fire Stick plugged into it. So the 2 of those I want to combine because I'm always going to watch it with a Fire Stick. And it was, I want to say 36 watts. That's all it took. It doesn't take very much. 36 watts is not a lot to worry about. And the big TV, which is a 70-inch TV, when it's plugged in and turned off, takes 20 watts. So it looks like it's off, but it's not. It's taking 20 watts. When it's turned on, it's 165 watts. So it's still not huge, but quite a bit more than the smaller TV. There's a reason why I will get into the TVs later on, because there's a different way I'm going to handle those. But the base thing that I need to run is a fridge, the freezer, the internet. We're going to run a couple of lights, but I'll probably do those off battery or rechargeable, that type of thing. The other thing you need to do is recharge your phones. So those don't take a lot. Most people, they go out and they buy a generator and they want to buy this great big, an 8,000 watt generator, and you can get something called a GenerLink, and that will plug into your power meter, and you can plug your great big generator into that. You run that, it runs most of the stuff in your house. Won't run everything completely all the time, but it'll run most things in your house. And that's nice to have all those conveniences, but you have to consider a few things. Those things are not portable. I mean, they might come on wheels, but they are 200 pounds, and they're not that portable. So you need a place to keep it that it's going to be protected from the elements. They also need a good connection to your house. So that cord, you can't cheap out on those cords. Those cords are $100 to $200 a piece. And then the GenerLink itself, if you buy one, is $1,200 to $1,500. Our power company here in New Brunswick, you can actually get one through them. It costs $25 a month, every month on your power bill, and they'll come and hook it up if you want to do that. So that's nice to have all those conveniences, but do you need it all? Probably not, because there's a few other things that you need to consider. During a power blackout, like a large storm situation, we had one last year. We'll likely have one again this year, different times. A couple things happen. When the power went down here, the gas stations also went down. So you think that maybe a gas station might be open, but in our particular area, they were not. I'd have to drive a long time to get to a gas station. And the bigger generators consume a lot of fuel. So there's the cost of buying the gas that you've got to have on hand in order to even make this run. You've got to be able to go get the gas. I'll just give you, I ran through some stats here on some of the different types of generators. So a 1200 watt generator, and that's like this little guy up here. These don't weigh very much. They're portable. They're easy to, it's just 110 volt extension cord you need to run into your house. There's a couple of different ways of doing that. I've seen people put in a pool noodle. So you open your window, take a pool noodle, you cut it, and you have a slice, and so that you don't have that draft. That's not a bad idea. But anyway, these little guys here, I've run this one quite a lot, and they're inexpensive to buy. They're on sale actually right now, I believe, at $299. Normally they're $399. An 80cc, so we'll just call this the 80cc base model portable. You might use this camping type generator. They hold 7.2 liters of gas, and they'll run 11 hours off that 7.2 liters. Weighs 55 pounds. They're not too loud, 65 decibels. So it runs 0.65 liters per hour of gas. So if you want to do the math, it's like $1 an hour to run it. Cost for 10 hours, $10.47. And gas you need, if you're going to run this for 24 hours, you might not run a generator all the time, but if you're going to run it for 24 hours, you're going to need 15 liters of gas. So that fits in your regular gas jug, no problem. The next sort of step up from that is probably one of these guys, like this size here, which is like a 3,000 watt or 4,000 watt surge generator. You can run quite a bit more stuff with that, including power tools. So it's great for job sites, that type of thing. That's kind of what they're intended for. This one is a camo one. It just happened to be the one that was on sale when I bought this, and I've had this 15 years or something like that. But you can get these usually pretty good. There's different versions of this, but they're all basically the same kind of in this vicinity. It's a 208 cc, I believe, engine. This thing weighs 100 pounds, so be aware of that before you plan on moving it around much. It's a little bit louder than the little yellow one. The regular price on these is like $600, but they often come on sale for like $500. I'm talking Canadian dollars here. They do use more gas, so it's about 1.5 liters per hour. So be aware of that. So your cost for 10 hours is going to be, $24 kind of thing. It's not horrible. If you're going to run it for 24 hours, you're going to need 35 liters of gas, 36 liters of gas. So you'll need 2 gas jugs, or you need to go back twice. And the gas station needs to be open in order for you to get that. So there's that. The better version, if you can afford it, is I don't have one, but there's an inverter generator. It's a smaller, it's like a 1,800 watt, 2,500 watt surge. Champion makes them as well. They're lighter than these. They're like 37 pounds. They use less gas, like 0.36 liters per hour. For 24 hours, you need 8.77 liters of gas. They're quieter. They're great. They do cost more up front. They're like $900, although I have seen them on sale for $650 recently. The bigger versions, you'll see the 5,500 watt generators. Those are really typically for construction sites, but I've seen people buy them for backup for their home. It's completely unnecessary. 5,500 watts is more than you need, unless you're running a sump pump, which is going to have a high kick on. I don't have one. I don't know what they measure at, but it's a larger motor. It's going to have a high kick. And you're running a couple of other bigger things that you might need that size for. But be aware, those will be the ones that are in the 389 cc range engine. They hold 29 liters of gas, and they'll run for 11 hours on that 29 liters. So that's 1.5 of your regular kind of jugs of gas for 11 hours of runtime. They weigh 155 pounds. So you're probably not lifting that up and lugging that around. You're going to have to wheel it. You're going to have to make sure you can do that. They are louder, 74 decibels. They run closer to $1,000. And they chew up about, and this is based on 50% load, mind you, they chew up about 2.64 liters of gas an hour. So your cost for 10 hours of running is going to be $42. And you're going to need 63 liters to run it for 24 hours. So you need at least 3 or 4 jugs of fuel on hand in order to be able to do that for 24 hours. The bigger step up from that is going to be like the 8,000 watt, 10,000 surge. They'll run 220 volts. So if you're going to plan on running a well pump or anything like that on it, that's what the size you're going to need. Usually they're 459 cc in that range. in that class. Surprisingly, they chew up about as much the same kind of fuel as the 5500 watt. There really isn't very much difference, believe it or not. But they weigh 200 pounds. So be aware of that. They're going to be more expensive at about 1,300 bucks. You're going to need better cords, and that stuff's not cheap. So you can't run these close to your house, or especially the bigger ones. Like carbon monoxide is a real thing. So you have to be aware of that. So you're going to need to invest in some good heavy duty extension cords. And I can't stress that enough. Do not cheap out on your cords. But they're going to run close to 3 liters an hour of gas. You're going to need 70 liters, so you're going to need 4 jugs of gas to run 24 hours. It's just, do you really need that? Do you really need that much if it's going to be a power outage for 2 or 3 days? Can you get by with making sure that your food doesn't spoil, your fridges are running, you've got some lights, you've got some communication? Really think about what your plan is for during a power outage and what you actually need. In most cases, this guy is the one that is really going to, if you're concerned about budget at all, for 300 bucks when these go on sale, they don't use a lot of gas. They're pretty convenient to move around. And measure the load that you need. Measure the amount of electricity you need would be I would start there and then figure out what it is you need to cover. If you were like me and you don't need a sump pump and you're okay without a well running, then you probably don't need hardly anything at all. So this might be your answer, the simplest answer. One thing to be aware of, though, when you are sizing your generator, like this one says, 1,200 watts, 1,500 starting watts, in other words, when your motors kick on. This one here is a 3,000, 4,000 starting watts. This 1,200 number should never be your constant load. Like if you're going to run, if you figured it out and you say, I need 1,200 watts, this will do fine. Probably not, because you're probably not going to get actually 1,200 watts out of these. It depends on a lot of factors. These gasoline generators, it depends on your fuel. You'll see that in the dual fuel generators, ones that can run propane or gas. If you're running on propane, that wattage is actually lower because of the fuel itself. So it really depends on the condition of your carburetor, how clean everything is, how well your valves are adjusted. I had this one, I could not get started after we ran it for a long time. When we were off grid here for a few months, and I could not start this thing anymore. And then finally I got grid power here, but it became extremely difficult to start. Anyway, just recently I decided I'm going to go at this thing. I looked at it. It was the valves. So I adjusted the valves and this thing runs tickety-boo. It starts super easy now. I've also replaced the carburetor on both of these. I had problems that it was running, it would do surging, it was dirty and stuff, and you can buy a replacement carburetor on Amazon for like 30 bucks or less. So that's what I did. I put a new carb on this and I adjusted the valves. This thing runs like brand new. In fact, better than it ever ran. It starts easier than it ever did. This one was the same thing, although the valves weren't so far out, but the carburetor was kind of screwed on this one. So, and it's an easy job. It's 10 minutes to change a carburetor on one of these. My point being that don't count on this number, this 1,200 or this 3,000 being what's available to you. It never is. The fuel consumption that I was just talking about is based on 50% load, and I would aim for 50% load, basically. You might have the odd kick on, but I have had this running on my setup in this house. So that freezer, when it kicks on, is like close to 600 watts for the startup. The fridge is 200 and whatever that was, 275 watts to start up. And when they start, you can hear it. This thing struggled a little bit, and there was a couple times where I had maybe a little too much plugged in. Fridge, freezer, internet, and I had a couple of other things plugged in, charging some stuff, things like that. And then the freezer would kick on, and it really struggled. I mean, it gets loud, and so be aware of that. Do not, this is about double what you need. So if you figure out that you need 600 watts and you're never going to need more than 600 watts, except maybe the odd kick on, this will probably do it. If you can get one on sale and you have the money, I would get the inverter generator, just because they work a little differently than these. These run at a constant RPM all the time, 3,600 RPM. That's what these engines run at all the time. It just, they run harder or less depending on the load that you're putting on the actual electrical generator part. An inverter will actually ramp up and down, and that's why they're so much better on gas. And the inverter itself handles the power output much more cleanly. If you have electronics plugged in or anything, you're trying to charge stuff, then if you can do it, I would just get the inverter. The 1850 inverter generator, the Champion sells, awesome unit, lightweight, easy to, it's much more enclosed, so you could probably leave it outside even if it's raining and stuff. It's not going to hurt it too much. You should not leave these out in the weather too much, because as you can see, there's electrical windings in here. This is the generator part, and moisture is not your friend here. But if you keep them relatively dry and you keep them protected, they'll do fine. Like I said, I've had this one 15 years and I put it through everything. I like this for if I'm running like power tools in some place. Like I had this when I was building my cabin, and I didn't want to run the 250 feet of extension cord over there, because that's a good way to kill the motors in your air compressor. So I ran it off this, and no problem at all. So this is great for that kind of thing. So just some things to think about when thinking about a generator for your home backup. But really consider in the actual practicality of when the power's out, or and it's a widespread power outage, will you be able to get gas? Do you have gas on hand? How easy is that going to be to run? How easy is it going to be to start? Make sure that you can start it fairly easily. I cheat. I use a drill. This is an older drill of mine. I've seen many people say, don't ever do this, but I have done this in the past. I'm not going to start it, but so you can see this. I've actually taken off the pull starts off both of these, and I can start this by that. So they're electric start. I mean, the bigger generators, if you do go and you spend the $1,200-1,300, they're electric start anyway, and they have their own battery, which again, you got to make sure that battery's got some charge in it, because you're starting those things is not easy. Those big generators, it's a hard pull. It's a hard thing to start with a pull cord. So you want the electric start, but you need to make sure the battery's charged up and make sure that it's ready to go. So things you have to think about if you're going to have a generator and you plan to, and if you're in an area like mine where there's common power outages and you're going to need to rely on your backup generator, you want to make sure that it does run. And during the summer, like I kind of forget about them for months at a time, but then I remember, maybe I should start the generator and run it for a while just to make sure it's running. When you start them, you turn on your gas, the instructions, but you turn on your gas, you flip on your choke, you flip off your choke. When you shut off your generator, and here's a tip, don't hit it, don't turn off the switch on the front. Don't do it that way. Turn off your fuel. There's a fuel valve on this one. I got the same thing down here. Shut off your fuel. It'll keep running. And what happens is running all the gas out of the line and out of the carburetor. So it cleans out all the old gas out of your system, and then it'll die on its own. And that's the way you want to turn those off. If unless you're running it every single day, if you plan to, then not a big deal. But if it's something that you ran for a few hours, so the power was out, power came back on, just shut your fuel off until it dies, and you'll be much better off down the road. It's one of the reasons I think I had to replace the carburetor on at least one of these. I did not do that. I just hit the switch, and the old gas stayed in the carburetor for, it might have been over a year. I think it was this one, and then you got to clean the whole thing out. It's just it's a whole thing. So just shut your fuel off. Change the oil in them after you need to. Do the proper maintenance. They're a gasoline engine just like your car or anything else, and you need to do that maintenance so that they're available when you actually need them. I ended up with two because, like I said, this one at the time, I could not get it started. I was frustrated. These came on sale. I bought this, and this was enough power for actually what I needed to run at the time. And this actually sat for years in here, and I never touched it. And I thought, one of these days I got to either take that to a small engine shop or get it looked at or whatever. And then I got looking around on YouTube, and then I thought, oh, somebody told me it's the valves. It happens every single time on these types of engines, is the valves go out of whack. And it really wasn't that difficult of a job once you figure it out. It didn't take very long. It might have been a 20-minute job to kind of get them all, and it started right up. And then I put a new carb on it, and I've had no issues ever since. So that is my take on generators. Don't oversize your generator. Only get what you need to get you through a blackout, and consider, if you're in the country, especially in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia or anywhere like that, or Maine or places like that, if you're in the country, you want to consider that you might be out of power for a week. So how easy is it to get fuel? Do you have fuel on hand? Do your generators run? Do you have everything you need to go for a week? And then, but size your generator accordingly, and don't overbuy. Don't get something bigger just because it's on sale or whatever. Get only what you need to get. And it would be my advice, and you'll be much better off.